Today, we'll be talking about indicator nymphing for Great Lakes steelhead. Hey everyone, Matt here with the Northern Angler. If you don't know us yet, we're a small independent fly shop located in Traverse City, Michigan. Now, we've done a few videos on steelhead in the past. We've done where and when to find them, the three main techniques we like to use, but I've been wanting to do a deep dive in each one of these. So today we're going to dive really deep into indicator nymphing. We're going to talk about what it is, why it's so effective, and the gear you'll need and how to rig it to find success on the water. In the next episode, we'll hit the water and show you how to use this technique. We'll cover casting, mending, and all the adjustments necessary to get your flies in front of fish. Let's start at the beginning and talk about what indicator nymphing actually is. This is a very popular technique that allows anglers to suspend their flies in the water column from a suspension device, often called an indicator. It can be extremely effective at detecting light takes from fish, and it's a very versatile system, so you can adjust it throughout the day as you approach different water types. Now, I alluded to there being three main techniques that we use to chase steelhead in the Great Lakes. That is chuck and duck, indicator nymphing, and swinging or stripping flies. But I would argue that indicator nymphing is the most versatile of those three techniques. This presentation style just makes it so easy to adapt to different water types. We have rivers that are full of sand, rocks, and tons that are full of wood, and this system works on all of them wonderfully. Let's go ahead and talk about the equipment you're going to want to be successful indicator nymphing. For steelhead, a 7 to 8 weight fly rod is the way to go. These are big, powerful fish that can really take some line and give up a good fight. Having a heavier rod here is a big advantage. Not only can you turn over indicator rigs with ease, but you can also steer those fish when they want to take you into the wood. Now, besides just the weight, you should also consider length and action. There's so many great rods out there on the market, but not all are going to be well suited for this technique. Personally, I think medium fast rods are the sweet spot for this technique. You can load and roll cast in tight spots and still have plenty of backbone to fight a big fish. Now, a 9-foot rod is standard and an extremely versatile tool in the Midwest. You can use it for so many things beyond just steelhead. But if you want to get a tool specifically for indicator nymphing, something that really makes life easy, think about getting a longer rod, something in the 9'6" to 10-foot range. It's going to make roll casting a breeze, and you're going to have so much more line control once you make that cast. A good reel is going to make a huge difference when you hook into a fish that's ready to run. The technology that's available to us in modern fly reels is truly fantastic. We see more fish landed today with these modern drag systems than ever before. First of all, you're definitely going to want to match your reel to your rod. So if you're running a 7 or an 8 weight fly rod, a 7/8 weight reel is going to be the way to go. If you can, get a reel that features a seal drag and a large arbor system. That seal drag is going to be really nice, especially in the Great Lakes where there's rivers full of sand. You don't want to have to deal with that stuff eating away at your drag mechanism. They're pretty much maintenance free, which is awesome. That large arbor is going to do a few things for you. First of all, less memory in your line. Everyone loves that, I know, especially in the colder months. Secondly, every rotation, you'll be able to bring in more line and get that fish closer to the net. I help a lot of people get rigged up for steelhead in our shop, and unfortunately, line can be a common afterthought. I get it, rods and reels are really cool, but the right line can make such a big difference to your experience on the water. We're going to spend a little bit more time talking about it than rods or reels. We're really lucky today to have some fantastic technology and purpose-built lines for almost any technique you could want to do with a fly rod. This includes indicator nymphing, of course, and there's some killer lines from all the good companies out there designed to make your life easy. They're designed to help you roll cast, they're designed to help you mend, and they're designed to throw big, gnarly indicator rigs. What makes these specialty lines so ideal for indicator nymphing is the long head. You're going to see heads from 40 all the way up to 60 feet in length. Now, that may not seem like a big deal, but your general, normal, run-of-the-mill weight-forward line usually only has a head of 30 feet. So think about that. Sometimes these are much, much longer heads. Now, when I'm referring to the head, I'm referring to the thick part of the line. Behind that, you have the running line, which is typically very thin. The advantage here is that you can roll cast with more line out of your guides. If you had a standard weight forward line, most of the time you're going to have to strip everything but 30 feet back in order to have enough mass to load the rod to roll the line. With these long head lines, you can make long, accurate casts without having to strip everything back in. It saves you time. It saves you from shooting line, so it's going to be a little bit more accurate as well. The other huge advantage to these long head lines is the amount of control anglers have after they make their cast. Mending is the name of the game in indicator fishing, and those who can do it catch a lot more fish. So being able to control that line, flex it with lots of line out there because you have the extra weight of that long head is going to make a huge difference, and you're going to catch more fish. For most anglers, the leader can get a little bit confusing. That's because there's no one setup for every single water type. Before we jump into the nitty-gritty though, let's go over some basic concepts so no one gets left behind. Now, I really want you to grasp how leaders work in this system because it's so important to your success on the water. I'm also going to talk about TIPPET because they're so closely related, it's not worth mentioning later on. First of all, a leader in fly fishing is a tapered, this is important, tapered piece of monofilament or fluorocarbon. I know that other types of fishing, a leader can be a level piece of line, but not in fly fishing. It is always a tapered section of line. This is a really important concept because typically in fly fishing, we're casting unweighted flies and we're relying on the mass in the fly line to transfer energy to the leader through that taper down to that weightless fly. If we tried to cast a weightless fly attached to a 9-foot section of just level line, it would never ever get anywhere. TIPPET, on the other hand, is a level section of line. Now, they have both monofilament and fluorocarbon, just like leaders. However, where most people get caught up is when to use this, and they're confused because leaders come with TIPPET already attached as part of that taper. So your very end section of your leader is always TIPPET. It goes butt section, midsection, and then your TIPPET section. But if you start to cut more and more flies off, you're going to eventually cut into that taper section. That's why all of us rely on spools of TIPPET to extend the life of our leader. The other great thing about TIPPET is you can modify your leader to your needs. I can take a heavy leader and just by adding a few sections of TIPPET, make it fit a light presentation. Now we could talk about leaders and TIPPET for days. And don't worry, there's more videos coming down the line that cover all those questions I know you have. But let's move on just in the context of indicator nymphing so you can get the information you need to hit the water. The true challenge of using a leader while you're indicator nymphing is the added weight required to get your flies down to where the fish are holding. No matter what, adding weight to your leader will increase casting difficulty. What's more, the longer your leader is, the more trouble you're going to have because that energy that has to travel all the way through your line diminishes the further it has to travel. With all that said, let's talk about the leader setups we find most effective for Great Lakes steelhead. For the rivers we like to wade fish throughout the Midwest, tapered leaders in the range of 7.5 foot to 9 foot are ideal. Usually I'm matching my leaders to the rivers I'm fishing. So the smaller the river, the shorter the leader, the bigger the river, the larger the leader I can use. That way, on tight spaces on those small rivers, I can still turn over those heavy indicator rigs. If our rivers are running low and clear, however, I will switch up to a longer leader and sacrifice castability for a little bit more stealth. In terms of strength, it may seem obvious, but your leader section should always be stronger than your TIPPET section. Most of us like to use either a barrel swivel or a TIPPET ring at the end of our leader and then add a TIPPET section below that. This does a few things for us. First of all, it adds a stop point for our split shot so it doesn't slide down to our flies. Second, we can add any section of TIPPET we want. We can easily jump from a heavy chunky line on the leader to a light TIPPET section. Last, this adds a built-in break point, so anytime we break off, all we have to do is add a new TIPPET section with a clinch knot. With that said, 10 to 15 pound leaders are perfect for almost all of our watersheds, and tippet sizes ranging between 6 and 10 pounds are perfect, and you can choose those depending on your water conditions. From that tippet ring or barrel swivel, your tippet section should generally be between 15 and 30 inches. Now I know that's quite the range, but really I'm leaving space here so you can match it to your fishery. Again, I mentioned earlier, on smaller rivers, I'll probably go a little bit shorter, and if I'm fishing something like the Big Manistee, big water, I'm gonna use a much longer section of tippet. If you do choose to run a second fly below that first section of tippet, copy what you're using above. Again, 15 to 20 inches will get you set up perfect. One quick note about material. Most of us rely on monofilament leaders and fluorocarbon tippets. Now I know there's some information about those materials not marrying well, but we've never had a problem with our barrel swivel or tippet ring setups. When we get to talking about different indicator styles, I will mention one more leader setup, but this is the standard for almost all the indicator nymphing we do. At the beginning, we talked about what indicators do, but there's tons of them out there, and we need to talk about the ones that you're gonna find useful for chasing steelhead. Now there's pros and cons to each, so going over these is gonna help you decide which ones are best for your fishery. First on the list are yarn indicators. Now these can be attached in several different ways. Some have an O-ring system where you just kind of create a cow hitch or a loop-to-loop system. Some use flexible tubing and special tools to attach them, and some you actually tie straight to your line. Now yarn indicators are great because they're very easy to cast and they're extremely sensitive. I learned to indicator fish using yarn indicators, and I remember just that slightest twitch or pause can mean the fish has taken your fly. The big downside with yarn indicators is they do not support quite as much weight as most of the other indicators and bobbers out there on the market. You can definitely still use them effectively for steelhead though, but know that your flies are going to take a little bit longer to sink with less weight on there, and so you're going to need a little bit more river to work with. Anglers well versed with yarn indicators can be remarkably effective as they land soft on the water and rarely spook fish. The next style you'll see a lot of, because they're the most popular, is a bobber style indicator. That's right, I said the B word. These are round bubbles that are filled with air. They support lots of weight and they work great for steelhead. Personally, they remind me of fishing with Grandpa and going down to the local pond, clipping a bobber and a worm on there and seeing what we'll find. But we've refined these a little bit and really designed some of them for fly fishing. Where yarn indicators struggle with weight, these excel and easily handle the weight required to get down to these fish in a hurry. Unfortunately, they're not quite as sensitive as yarn or other indicators on the market, but they're still easily the most popular to use. The third style we're going to talk about today is something a lot of fly anglers have borrowed and begun to experiment with from other styles of fishing. That is floats. Floats are elongated indicators, bobbers if you will, that are extremely sensitive. They're actually rated for how much weight they can each support. Rigging these is fairly easy. Some use bobber stops and slide easily up and down your line. Some use surgical tubing so you can easily change out the size depending on the water you're fishing. The real advantage with using floats is the sensitivity you can achieve. We'll be doing a floats on fly rods video in the future, so stay tuned for that. But for now, know that you're going to need to use a little bit different leader setup to make these effective. Because these floats use so much more weight, using a tapered leader is pretty pointless. You're going to want to use either a 10 or 12 pound, even 15 depending on your conditions, section of level fluorocarbon. I like to use 8 to 10 feet depending on how deep I'm fishing, and you're going to utilize a very picturesque lob cast. It's not pretty, but man, it works. Below that section of level line, everything on the tippet side looks the same as what we discussed before. Now that we talked about all the parts and pieces you're going to need, let's review how it all goes together so you can hit the water with confidence. Okay, you've got your rod, you got your reel, you got your long head indicator specific fly line. Let's talk about what comes next. Off of your fly line, you need to have a leader. Most fly lines today are going to come with a welded loop. From there, you just loop to loop your leader, again 7.5 foot to 9 foot that ends in 10 or 12 pound test. That goes to a barrel swivel or a tippet ring. From there, we're going to add a tippet section, usually around 20-24 inches to that first fly. Now, if your fly line does not have a welded loop, you can simply nail knot that leader right to your fly line. If you want to run a second fly off of that first one, add a section of tippet off the bend of your first hook, same length around that 20-inch mark down to your second fly. Remember, the tippet should match the water conditions. So the clearer the water is, the lower it is, the lighter I'm gonna go. Usually my rule of thumb is use the biggest tippet you can get away with. These are big, powerful fish, and you definitely want a chance at landing them. But if you go too heavy, you risk never hooking one. In most cases, your weight's gonna be concentrated at the end of your leader down by your swivel or your tippet ring. You can either put it on directly to your line or drop a little tag when you tie your swivel or tippet ring on and attach it to that. I like usually putting it straight onto my line. It casts a little bit better, but there's definitely an advantage if you want to drop it off of a tag because that will ride lower than the rest of your system. And if it gets caught up, you won't lose the whole rig. The big crux to keep track of is the distance between your indicator and that very last split shot, which is usually located right at that barrel swivel. That is the distance you're going to want to manipulate and tinker with, not the distance between your flies and your indicator. I like to start fishing fairly high in the system. Give those fish a chance to come up and be aggressive. So I usually start with 1 times the assumed depth of where I'm fishing. So if it's 4 feet deep, I'm usually going to have 4 feet between my indicator and my swivel. How much weight to use is a very difficult question to answer. That's why we're going to do another video out on the water where we show you how to make these casts, how to mend, how to manipulate your system to fit the watershed and what's going on the river. So stay tuned for that. Generally, I use 1 or 2 B's or 3-0 split shots just to get started. Know that if you're using a float system, you need to use a little bit different of a setup. Most of us like to use a dispersed shot pattern, that is weight distributed throughout that longer leader. You achieve a really even sink pattern and drift pattern so that those fish see your flies before they see anything else. Well, that's it for us today, everyone. Thanks so much for watching and for all the wonderful support. If any of this was helpful, think about hitting that thumbs up button. It's a big help to us. If you'd like to support this channel, think about shopping at thenorthernangler.com. We have tons of fly tying stuff, tons of fly fishing gear. At the very least, though, try and support your local fly shops. I know they'll appreciate it. Again, stay tuned for number 2 in this series and all the subsequent videos we're going to be coming out with. I'm excited to get on the water and get filming. Hope to see you all very soon in the shop or out on the water.